Hey. So you're probably wondering, why do I have this little cartoon on here? If you're in my age range, you already know who this is. This is courage, and that is the theme of the week, okay? So last week we went over understanding that, it's not about finding yourself, it's about building and creating the version of yourself that you want to become. And today we're going to be talking about a little bit something different. So I just want to stop to tell you guys thank you so much for listening in, and I hope that with whatever I have to say today, that you'll take it into this week and you'll actively work on it and meditate on it so that you could become the best version of yourself. That being said, the quote of this week is by Winston Churchill, and it goes: success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is courage to continue that counts. So, there are about three distinct ideas in this quote, and I want to break each one of them down and how I understand them, but feel free to put in the comments what your understanding of the quote is. For me, the first part is success is not final. This part we skip over because it sounds strange, right? Why would Churchill, warn us about success? Here's why. Success can be just as dangerous as failure because it can make us become complacent. It can make us think that we've arrived to the destination or become the person that we envision ourselves being. It can make us stop learning, stop adapting, stop growing, stop trying, stop fighting, stop building. Every success in your life is really just a chapter, not a conclusion. And so the moment you treat a win as a destination, you stop moving forward. And that's when life keeps moving rather than you do. You get what I'm saying? And that's what the first part of this quote really means to me when it says success is not final. The second part of this quote says failure is not fatal. So this is the line we need desperately because most of us are walking around treating our failures like they're lethal, like they define us, like the doors close permanently. And trust me, this is something that I feel like is one of my biggest challenges in life and I'm constantly working on. So Churchill is a man who experienced crazy military failures, political defeats, and exile from power. And he's telling us from lived experience, it doesn't end here. Failure is painful. Yeah, it can be costly. And yeah, it's real. But it's not the end of your story unless you decide that it is. And then the last part of this quote is: it is the courage to continue that counts. Oof, that's the part that matters. So, this is the center of the quote: not talent, not strategy, not intelligence, but our happy dancy dog, courage. So, the specific, quiet courage to keep going when everything in you wants to stop, that's the deciding variable. That's the thing that more than any other single quality determines the outcome over time of the person you will become and you're becoming. So Churchill's let me tell you a little bit of story behind this quote because you know me, I like to look up, more about the person who wrote the quote so that we could really understand the behind the scenes. So in Churchill's life, he was a masterclass in this quote because his life is a story of staggering failures by extraordinary comebacks. He was considered a failure in school. I mean, this guy, he was struggling with stutter. He he had his first major political position, which was basically the first lord, I believe, and then orchestrated one of the most disastrous military campaigns in World War One history. And this killed hundreds and thousands, nearly destroyed his career entirely. And he spent most of the 1930s in what we call the wilderness years and marginalized, mocked, maybe even largely ignored by political establishments. His warnings about Hitler were dismissed as rambling of washed up politician. He drank heavy. He struggled with what we call the black dog. This term is basically depression that shadowed him throughout his entire life. And then in the 1940s, Britain stood alone. Every expert said it was over. And Churchill, a 65-year-old man who had been written off for years, became prime minister and gave one of the most consequential performance in leadership history. So the courage to continue that Churchill defining that was Churchill's defining quality, right? Not his brilliance, not his charisma, but the willingness to keep going when everything said stop. And no feminize saying that I'm like the number one like Churchill fan. I'm just interested in this specific story and the courage that he took to continue when everything else and his bone and everything around him was telling him to stop. I want to talk about the courage to continue and what this actually feels like. Because I think we have a romanticized like version in our heads that doesn't actually match reality. So in movies, continuing look like a triumphant, big swelling music, a determined face, like eyes locked in on the horizon. I'm talking about like the biggest, most serious, grandest thing you could think of. But in real life, continuing looks like getting out of bed when you don't want to, maybe making one more phone call after the 10 rejections. I don't know, opening your laptop when a project feels hopeless, starting a business when everyone tells you that you can't, saying the hardest thing in a conversation you've been avoiding, or like me, going to gyms on the days you feel least like going. I'm talking about dragging yourself there. Continuing is usually quiet, it's unglamorous, and deeply uncomfortable. And that discomfort is the cost of the mission for meaningful growth, for retiring those old habits and stepping into the best version of yourself. So, here's what I've come to believe about failure, it's not the opposite of success. I think this is something that I'm constantly having to remind myself because I feel like as we grow, that's what we learn. The opposite of success is failure. That's what I've been taught my whole life. But it is the truth is that it's a part of the path to success. That every person you've ever admired, every entrepreneur, every athlete, every artist, every leader has a failure story that would make your failure looks minor. The difference is that they treat those failures as information rather than, you know, just as they are failures. So failures say that approach didn't work. You have to look at it differently. Failures say adjust, learn, try differently. Failures do not say you are not capable. That's your imposter syndrome speaking. That's the negative you, the lower level you that's speaking. And sometimes we fall trapped to listening to what that person or that voice has to say. But that interpretation, that meaning we've attached to failure is something that we add. And we can choose to add a different meaning. Because remember, last week we understand that we are creating, we're building. So every choice that you make is what becomes your reality. So this is your reminder again from last week that even this choice of understanding what the meaning of failure means is what actually matters. So from Churchill, he could have looked at his failure and said, I'm not cut out for leadership. I was wrong. I should step back. Many people in this position, I feel like, would have. Instead, he extracted the lesson, he rebuilt, and he kept going. And so this is important because your failures are not evidence of your limitations. They're evidence that you're in the arena, trying things, taking risks, growing. The only way to never fail is to never try. And a life without trying it's kind of like failure itself. The most painful kind because it's invisible, right? So, that being said, here's your Monday practice around this quote. I want you to think of failure, of any failure, whether it be recent or not, that you're still carrying with you. Something that you haven't fully processed. Something that when it comes to mind, it still stings. And now that you've thought of that, I want you to separate two things: what actually happened in that moment and the meaning you've been giving it. What actually happened is the fact. The project didn't work, the relationship ended, the interview didn't lead to the job. I don't know, you didn't hit your weight goal for this week. That's a fact. The meaning, this is what's really important because this is the interpretation. This means I'm not good enough. This means I should give up. This means this area isn't for me. This means I'll never succeed. Those are your imposter syndrome. That's your imposter syndrome speaking. That's not you. That meaning interpretation is whatever you make it. So the first part is real, the fact is real. The second part is the story, and the stories can be rewritten because remember, you are the author of your own journey and you are the creator of the future version of yourself. So, what if the failure meant something, completely different? What if it meant I learned something crucial? I don't know, I wasn't ready then, but now I know more. I needed the obstacle to grow. I don't know, I'm being redirected somewhere better. This is what this failure could potentially mean. And this quote that Churchill gives us, it gives us a permission to grieve, these failures without being destroyed by them, to acknowledge a success without being stuck in them, and above all, to keep going, not because continuing is easy, but because it's one thing that makes all the difference. So, here's what I want you to carry with you this week: the fact that you are still here, still showing up, it's not a small thing. This is everything. You might be in a failure right now. You might be in the middle of a setback that feels impossible, but you showed up today. You're listening, and that's the courage to continue. That's what actually counts. So don't let success stop you, and don't let failure stop you. Just keep going. Like Nike says, right? One day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of courage at a time. So that's all I have to say for this episode. Like always, I'll put the reflective questions if you want to go a little bit deeper with yourself in the description, and I'll also put a journal entry in the description. If you like this episode and you found it helpful, please share this episode with someone who's in the middle of a hard season right now, who's feeling like they're battling with failures right now, and they need to hear what I have to say. And remember to come back next Monday as we work together to improve the best version of ourselves and retire the old habits that we have. And I'll see you then. Like, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. Bye.